I've been learning Remix, the React framework, and I think its three most powerful features are the routing system, data loaders, and form actions. So I wanted to come up with a quick tutorial that will show sort of how to take advantage of those working with a database. So I've already set up a database, just a really simple one that has two tables. We have a post table that stores sort of some blog post content, a title, and the content itself, and then comments. So posts can be commented on. So we're going to work with this Remix app to basically build out a page that will show the post, its comments, and the ability to add new comments to a post. This is the home page right now. We're not going to work on this, but I'm going to click into my first post, and we need to now implement this. So the URL is /post/1, and right now it's just sort of showing dummy data. So in the first part, we're going to learn how to work with data loaders to go and grab this from the database. So for that, we are going to be using Prisma, and I've already set up my Prisma schema where I basically define, hey, here's what a post looks like, the fields it has, here's what a comment looks like and how it's related to a post. So we're not going to go into Prisma setup in this video. I've also set up this little util db.server, which I basically copied from an example on the Remix website. But all it does is basically set up an instance of the Prisma client, the ability to connect to the database. But it does a little bit of like caching so that as Remix is reloading constantly in the dev environment, it's not constantly reconnecting to the database and sort of using up all the connections that it can have. So that's what this code does here. We're not going to really touch on it. Where we are going to spend some time right now is working in this component, and we're going to use data loaders to load the post from the database. The first thing to keep in mind is that it's within app routes. All your routes live here. It's a file-based routing system. And inside of post, we have a file called $ID. So $sign represents a dynamic part of the URL. So that's the one here. So it could be 2, 1, etc. Doesn't really matter. In our case, that lines up with the post in the database. So that would be this ID here, and we're going to load that. So the first thing to do is basically to set up the data loader. And to do that, we are going to export a function called loader. And it is a type of loader function, which I've already imported from Remix itself. And that is going to be an async function that receives some params, which we'll talk about in a second. And then we have to implement the body of this. So params. This, in our case, we're going to be looking at how to get the ID of the post that we're trying to load. So to do that, we're just going to put it in a variable. Const ID is equal to params.id. But in a second, you're going to see that, that Prisma doesn't really like this because the type of ID could be string or undefined. So what we actually need to do is convert it into an integer. And to do that, we're just going to say parse it as an int. And if there's nothing there, just parse it as an empty string. If you don't have this, TypeScript again freaks out because you need to pass in a string here. So we're just going to get past this. So now we want to try to load the actual post. So we're going to put it into a variable called post, and we are going to await the db post.findFirst, and we want to find where the ID is equal to ID, but we don't need that, so we can just write it like this. So what we want to basically do here is let's check if there was actually a post. What if we send up an ID that doesn't exist? We need to basically handle a 404 page. So we're just going to say if there was not a post, what we're going to do is throw a new response. And the response will say not found, and the status will be 404, which means not found. So where does this get caught by? If you throw something, you want to try to catch it. That happens up here. Well, basically it gets handled by the server itself, but in the root, I didn't write any of this code. It basically comes when you generate a new Remix app. There is an error boundary and a catch boundary. So here is basically where this will get caught by Remix itself, and it will show an error message. So if we get to the bottom, we're going to return the data that we want to make available inside of our component. So here we're going to return an object that has the post in it. And at this point, we can basically, let's work a little bit with types. Let's say we're going to declare a type called loader data, and it will contain a post. And what type is that post? Well, because I'm working with Prisma and it's all typed, I can import that type from here. So it's going to be a post. So with that in place, we can update our loader function to say that it's going to return loader data. This is wrong right now because it's an async function, which means it actually returns, it returns a promise that will resolve to the loader data. So fixed there. So we're returning a post, hopefully, if it all worked as expected. One way we can check is we can console.log the post. So keep in mind that loader happens on the server. So if we come here and we load the page, we should expect the console output to be over here in the server. And you can see it being logged right here. So it seems to be working correctly. So we'll just clean up that code, come here, and Remix comes with a hook that will basically pass us the data returned by this function. So here we can say grab the post, and it comes from use loader data. But because we're working with TypeScript, we can pass in the type hint, so that would be the loader data. And by doing that, it now knows what a post is. So we can come, and I sort of pre-filled in what we're going to be typing, but just to show you the power of TypeScript, we can say post dot, and it knows the columns that we have in this data. So post.title and post.content. So if I go back to the web, we are now loading this post. So that was pretty easy in Remix. That's all about data loaders, and it's really nice to work with. But the next part is, I think, a cool feature and power of Remix, and that's the routing system and how it supports nested routes right out of the box, which I don't think any other React frameworks do. And what we're going to do for that is basically in the page below the post, we're going to load and display the comments of this post. So what we're going to do is basically the default of when you're looking at a post is to show the comments. And what we're going to do is basically create a folder with the same name as the file, so $ID, and we're going to be working with the index. So see, I already have it a default functional component being exported that says comments, but you can see that it's not showing up yet. So the way you get nested content to be displayed in Remix is by taking this outlet component that's from Remix and basically saying where you want to display the nested content on the page. So now we have comments showing up, but we need to go build the data loader to load the comments and display them. So a lot of that is this same work we've just done. Why don't we type it out again rather than copying and pasting it, even though it will take an extra minute or so. We'll start though. We know we want to declare a type called loader data, and it's going to have comments, which is an array of comment. So that comes imported type from the Prisma client. And now we need to build the data loader function. So we'll say export let loader, and it is going to be type of loader function, and that is an async function that receives params, and it's going to return a promise that resolves to the loader data. So right now it's mad because it is not resolving to that. So what we're going to do is basically grab the post ID. So this would be the ID that's up here in the URL. And index works because that's sort of the default. So even though there's no like nested something after this route, it still knows to use this nested page because index is the default. So we're going to parse int the params.id, and that we have that. And then using the post ID, we can use our Prisma database connection to load the comments. So comments is equal to await db.comment, find many, and we want to find where the post ID is equal to post ID. Remember, you don't need to double that up, so we'll get rid of it. Cool. So with that in place, we can just return comments. And now we need to use our useLoaderData hook to basically grab the data that was returned. So comments is equal to useLoaderData, type hint to loader data. And now we can come down here below the comments and render them out. So comments.map a comment to an li. We need to give it a key, so that would be comment.id. And what we're going to display is comment dot, what's it saying? Comment has an any type. Oh, I know why. Loader data, man, many mistakes. Okay, comment dot content. Just like that. So if we come back here now, we see a comment for this post. So in the database, we just have one comment right now. It's associated with post 1, which is what we're looking at. So it would be nice to add new comments into here, right? So here's where we're going to see another example of how to use nested routes. And we're also going to take a look at the form action functions that come with Remix. Okay. So what we're going to do is basically when we're viewing the comments here, we're going to throw a link at the bottom and we're going to say new comment. And we're going to take that link to what we want the URL to do is /comment. And the way we can get it to do that is by just saying comment. Now, why does this work? It's because we didn't add anything to the beginning of this route. So it's using relative routing. So it's basically adding comment to the end of whatever URL currently exists. So we come back here. Maybe I should be throwing this in a P like that. We click new comment and it routes us to /comment. So this is the cool part about nested routes. We're still showing sort of the parent content, but we're only changing this sort of nested part of the page. So because we're on /comment nested within post, we can come sort of $ID comment, and that's what it's displaying right here inside of the outlet function. So the outlet is always where it shows the child or the nested content. So in here, why don't we first just start by adding a P with a link that will take us back to sort of the previous page. So maybe we just say cancel. We don't want to add a new comment. And we'll just say to back. So if we come here now, we can click that and we can go back, forward, back, forward. It's never reloading this data. It's always just updating this nested portion. So inside of here, I want to now show a form. So typically you use the form tag like that, but there's one that comes in Remix with a capital F, and it knows sort of how to post nicely to an action function that can receive that form data and then figure out how to process it. So in our case, we're going to take the form data and write a new comment to the database. I am going to change the method to post because by default it does a get method, which will add sort of a question mark and whatever data to the URL. And inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to put a label that has a div that says content. And this is probably going to be the ugliest form you've ever seen in your life, but that's all good. So we're going to do a text area, and the name of this text area will be content, just like that. We are going to make it required. So let's make sure it's working okay. That is a beautiful form. We need a way to submit it, so we'll just throw a div with a button that says save or add, and we'll make this type submit. Beautiful. So now if we were to enter this in, awesome post, and add, it like doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how to process this data that's being posted somewhere. And that's because we need to go and define our action function. So we need to export a function called action, and it is type action function. And that is an async function that receives both the params, because we need to grab the post ID from the URL, and also the request, which will give us access to the data being submitted through the form. And then it is going to have this the function body right here. So first things first, let's get the post ID. So post ID is parse int of params dot ID, like that. Next, we're going to get the form data. So basically, whatever was posted up to us. So for that, we're going to await the request dot form data, just like that. So with the form data, we can now ask for the content value, whatever the user posted up to us. So content is equal to form data get the content. And we're just going to, because it's saying it's either a form data entry value or null, we're going to sort of just skip the type checking here and say, trust me, it's a string. Okay, so if you're writing this production, you need it to be rock solid. You're going to want to add some validation here that you did get the correct data from the user. And if it's not correct, there is a way to return JSON that then shows the error out here in the form. We're not going to do that today. We're just going to try to, let's get this into the database. So first thing we're going to do is load the post that we're going to be trying to add this comment to. So we'll await the database post find first, where the ID is post ID, just like that. And we need to check, because it could be null if they tweak the URL and the post doesn't actually exist. So we're just going to say if there's no post, we are going to return, and it's up to you to sort of figure out how you should handle this error. Do you want to, I don't know, do a 404? In our case, we're just going to redirect the user back to the home page. Like you're on an invalid URL, get out of here. So at this point, we have a post and we're ready to add a comment to it. So we can just say db.comment.create with the following data. So the data it needs is the post ID, which we already have here, but we could just say post.id, get it right from the post object we loaded here. And we also need the content, which comes from the variable here that we told is a string. And if that's the case, let's take them back now to sort of, we want to show the index, which has all of the comments being displayed. So we can just say return a redirect to, so this would be /post/post ID, like that. So we're going to try to add a comment. This is a fantastic post. Add it. Redirects us back here, which reloads the data, and we have the post down here at the bottom. So new comment, another one. Save that, redirect back here. So what we've done pretty quickly, I think, is using the power of its nested routing to change just this part of the page and basically toggle between showing the comments and adding a new one, taking advantage of the data loading as well as the action function that can process the form data and store it in our database. So we're up and running. We didn't have to go create a GraphQL API, set up Apollo, set up endpoints, and all of this stuff just to show and save some data into our database. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you're starting to see some of the power that Remix has, and give it a try yourself. Take care. Peace. Bye.